Okay, this is chapter 11. This chapter was mostly about religion and its intersection with culture, modernism, and science. So, first, we will talk about the growing religion in the country. Amy Semple McPherson, pictured left, dubbed the world's most prodigious, which means like beautiful or gorgeous, like evangelist, launched her career as a Pentecostal preacher in August of 1915 in Ontario. She was born there, married an evangelist, and went on missionary trips with him to England and China. When he died, she returned home with her child, remarried, had another child, and returned home to the family farm. Amy advertised her first revival meeting, having heard the Lord's call following a near death experience. By the end of the week, she was preaching to as many as 500 people. She then took to the road carrying the barest of essentials and her two children. Over the next couple of years, Amy trekked through Canada and the United States. She created her idea of the Foursquare Gospel: salvation through Christ, the literal understanding of the Bible, divine healing, and a belief in Second Coming. She soon branched out to preach in New Zealand and Australia, all while collecting money for her dream temple, the Zion of Southern California. Revival meetings were synonymous with rural life. But as Darwin's theories triggered a new crisis of faith, we saw Protestants making adjustments to theology, downplaying the literalness of the Bible. They adopted the social gospel and tried to make the world a better place by fighting poverty, racism, and war. Although the number of temples and churches rose, religious influence and the number of clergy was declining in the United States. The South, though, remained tied to the old Baptist and Methodist ways and were repelled by modernism. These fundamentalists sought to purify American life. Many of them subsequently joined the KKK. Okay. Billy Sunday was one of the kings of revivals in the country. He was the son of a Union soldier and became a star outfielder and base stealer of the Chicago White Stockings, now the White Sox. He drank and chased women until he, quote, publicly accepted Christ as his savior. He then married, gave up baseball, and became a traveling evangelist. His sermons were full of fire and brimstone teachings, asserting anyone who accepted evolution was a hypocrite and saloons are corrupt. He held revivals in major cities and left the podiums there so local preachers could continue his work. He became famous and a little controversial, with liberals complaining his sermons contained political and cultural conservatism. He severely contrasted Sister Amy, who taught a less strident Christianity, exchanging the gospel of fear for the gospel of love. She set up shop in San Francisco, known for its struggling population, and said she was the office girl Jesus used to heal people. In 1923, Sister Amy consecrated her $1.5 million Angelus Temple, seating 5,000 people, and it could be seen for miles. She turned fundamentalism into show business and spread her empire, opening 178 missionary stations, providing jobs for the unemployed, and carrying her voice to millions using KFSG. Up until May 1926, that is, when Amy went swimming one day and proceeded to go missing. Months later, she stumbled out of the desert near the Mexican border with a strange and unbelievable story of kidnapping and torture, leading to the creation of rumors of what really happened. She claimed to be an innocent victim of conspiracy, but her fame was on a downward spiral from then on. Other preachers, jealous of her success, paid the DA keys to file charges against her. Um, Sinclair's Lewis expose of revivalist preachers harmed her image, and she broke her own edict, remarrying after divorce. She died in 1944. Here we're introduced to Henry Mencken. He was enthralled with Sister Amy, nominating her for Miss America. In his writings, and more generally, he was interested in social comment and politics than literature. He intended to, and I quote, combat chiefly by ridicule American piety, stupidity, tin pot morality, and cheap chauvinism in all their forms. He published the writings of blacks, inmates, vagrants, anyone with anything interesting to say. He soon became the most denounced um, and most powerful private citizen, according to the New York Times. Mencken was born in Baltimore. As a young man, he read everything he could about journalism. After graduating high school, he went into the family tobacco factory, working until his father's death, when he immediately saw a job at the Baltimore Morning Herald. He became a familiar investigative force at the police stations, waterfront saloons, and bounty houses, where he would play the piano. He rose rapidly, becoming city editor. Following a fire at the Herald, he left for the Sun, staying there for the rest of his life, and developing a column there called The Freelance. His style was influenced by Mark Twain's frontier, motivated exaggerations, Ambrose Bierce's cynicism, the satire of George Bernard Shaw, and Nietzsche's use of hyperbole. He believed criticism must be done boldly and cruelly. He fired off scattershot opinions. He was denounced by many during his career as a dog, maggot, dangerous, red, and reactionary, to name a few. He challenged old ways of thinking but remained a skeptic, holding Victorian morals. Mencken opposed all attempts to silence freedom of speech, though, disagreeing with the deportation of anarchist Emma Goldman. A few pages later in the book, we see details about the dark side of Mencken. His writing contained strains of anti Semitism, and he had an attitude of patronizing superiority to blacks. But he was not a Nazi nor a racist. He was an equal opportunity hater, as he also attacked the British preachers, politicians, and feminists. After the Night of Broken Glass, for example, he advocated lax immigration laws for Jews to be able to flee to the United States. Mencken's advocacy of freedom of speech came as a riot of censorship began. Mae West and the producers of her play, Sex, were arrested for indecent performance. The Captive, a play about the breakup of a marriage orchestrated by the wife's lesbian lover, was closed, and the cast was arrested on obscenity charges. The state banned any work portraying sexual perversion. This was New York State. Censoring fell heavily on the movie industry, and its proponents attacked the industry's low morals. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Federal Motion Picture Council, and the Catholic Church called for government censorship, pointing to the 1915 Supreme Court ruling that movies were subject to restraint. There was an undertone of anti-Semitism, as the movie industry was dominated by Jewish directors. Hollywood itself was rampant with scandals, with rumors of narcotics, riotous parties, homosexuality, and drinking further encouraging censorship. Roscoe Arbuckle, a popular comedian, was charged with homicide in the death of actress Virginia Rappe after a wild party. He was acquitted after 3 years, but his reputation was ruined. A year later, director William Desmond Taylor was shot to death with two young girls, Mabel Normand and Mary Miles, were romantically linked to him. Some reports tied Taylor to a narcotics ring, including Wallace Reid, who also later died of a morphine overdose. Mongols, scared of how the scandals would further inspire censorship, was decided to follow the example of Judge Landis in the Black Sauce scandal, and they made Will Hayes the movie Cesar. The newly organized Motion Pictures Producers and Distributors of America under Hayes blocked federal censorship and inserted the moral clause into movie industries. Studios voluntarily agreed to submit scripts to the Hayes office, and profanity, nudity, illegal drugs, sexual perversion, ridicule of the clergy, white slavery, and insults to nations, creeds, or races were dropped from the screen. The battle between the past and the present came to a head during the Scopes trial. To modernists, Darwinism was a scientific fact. They were shocked when 15 states seriously considered passing anti-evolution law. In March of 1925, Tennessee approved the Butler Act, making it illegal for any teacher to teach anything that goes against the story of divine creation. A group of men in Dayton came together to test the law and decided John Scopes, a civic biology teacher, would teach using the book Civic Biology and acknowledge evolution. Scopes was arrested. Mencken dubbed the story the Monkey Trial and covered the entire story with commentary early in the Baltimore Evening Sun. The trial also drew the attention of William Jennings Bryan, who saw a chance of public support of the Bible as a way to get support for a fourth presidential run. Bryan was an absolute champion of social justice and an advocate of international understanding and peace abroad. His political vision was compromised solely by self-righteousness and a simplistic worldview. On the other side of the trial, the ACLU earmarked Clarence Darrow, whose rose to fame following the Leob and Leopold trial. The Scopes trial became a carnival, with both sides showing up in support of their views in the small town of Dayton. The trial began on July 10, 1925, with Judge John Ralston presiding. He was up for election and had grown up with the Bible at his side. Darrow decided to put anti-evolution itself on trial, using scientists to assert Darwinism was fact and was compatible with Christianity. Bryan asserted that the degrees and science meant nothing. Darrow took the next step of putting Bryan at the stand. The next day at the trial, Darrell vigorously questioned Bryan on the merits of the Bible and its literal interpretation, weakening the resolve of Bryan and embarrassing him. But his hold on believers was weakened. Scopes was not weakened. Scopes was ultimately convicted and told to pay $100. Bryan, embarrassed, led a church in prayer 5 days later and died. Other states, emboldened by Tennessee, passed their own laws, but the Supreme Court later ruled against the Arkansas anti-evolution law because it violated the separation of church and state. Equal time bills were passed in 2 states, but were considered by 20, and it required both Darwinism and creationism to be taught, but it was struck by the Supreme Court as the state still sponsored the teaching of evolution. The battle between creationists and evolutionists is far from over, and it still rages on today. And that is the end of chapter 11.